Hey, you incredible leader. Thank you for stopping by today on the Pausecast. I want to talk about social intelligence today. I talk a lot about emotional intelligence, but the real word is actually social and emotional intelligence. We kind of drop that social part a lot, but what it means is social intelligence is literally how we relate to others. That's really all it is. So I want to talk today about how this relates to your leadership and how you can be a better leader if you incorporate more aspects of social intelligence. Social and emotional intelligence is the four domains that overall improve your own effectiveness as a leader. That includes increasing the connection between individuals, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So those four attributes are the definition of emotional intelligence, but that social awareness and relationship management, those last two are really about the social intelligence. So the first two, the things I mentioned, self-awareness and self-management, are really about how do we know what's going on inside of us? What are we feeling? How do we relate to those feelings ourselves? And then how do we manage that with others, the self-management? So do I express what I'm feeling? Do I hold it back? Do I share it responsibly? Do I go into drama about it and kick and scream or point and blame and shame? Those are the aspects that are the emotional. And then the social intelligence is how we recognize and build those relationships in our really complex work systems. In general, I think successful leaders really can transform their own approach to managing themselves and learning new behaviors through this aspect and this lens of social and emotional intelligence so that you can be, or a leader could be really internally resonant and attuned with themselves to know what and how they're leading is what works for them. And we're all different, but we all know a leader who's equipped with the skills and in the social emotional intelligence skills to be a good leader. We know the ones that aren't. Maybe they're not good listeners. Maybe they avoid eye contact. Maybe it's their way or the highway. Like, these are all skills that can get in the way, right? These are things that don't necessarily mean there's just room for improvement, I would say, in social intelligence. So when we're able to use these interpersonal skills is when we can truly shine in social intelligence. And that's in every social network that we have. It could be at work, it could be in the clients you have, it could be your family and your loved ones. I mean, it really doesn't just bound to work. It's about the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And that's also critical for the success of your relationships. And we all know relationships are everything, right? We know this from many different levels. And I won't go into that topic today. But I think this is key, knowing that social intelligence is key to building relationships. I think that's the point I'd like to get across today. And remember, we talked about this in another podcast. Transformational leaders, this is the key thing. They're those who stimulate and inspire followers to both achieve extraordinary outcomes and, in the process, develop their own leadership capacity. That's a pretty big ask. I'll say that one more time because it's kind of lofty. Transformational leaders stimulate and inspire followers to both extraordinary outcomes. And as a result, these transformational leaders develop their own leadership capacity. So you learn as you go, but you're bringing in what you're telling others in the way that you're leading yourself. Isn't that cool? Right? If you encourage honest and transparent communication, that means you're going to be honest and transparent in communication. That's really what it means. I think there's a couple other points to bring in about the research, because if we don't know the history, then it just doesn't have as much credibility, right? And I want you to know this stuff in and out because this is critical to your leadership. So this is a concept that's evolved over the years of social and emotional intelligence. In 1920, okay, this is like 100 years ago, Edward L. Thorndike first proposed that social intelligence was a type of intelligence distinct from verbal or academic intelligence. Isn't that cool? They were figuring this out 100 years ago. We didn't really hear about it, though, until a little later. And then in the 1960s, so the 60s was what? It was the human potential movement. It was Vietnam. It was after World War II, where things were so stifled. And now we were learning about feelings or expression, and there were the psychedelics and our hippie movement and music and the Woodstock, right? All this stuff was going on in the 60s. Someone by the name of J.P. Guilford postulated that there were at least 30 facets of social intelligence in addition to the standard intellect model. So now we're starting to form different ideas of intelligence. Again, we're building on what these things mean. So these 30 facets were nonverbal in nature and had included elements of understanding emotions and feelings. So isn't that cool? Like, so there we are again with learning more about this. And then in the 1980s, Howard Gardner added intrapersonal and interpersonal forms of intelligence to this definition. Interpersonal meaning understanding your own feelings, motivations, and interests. Interpersonal about how other people are relating to you. And then boom, we hit it home with 1995 or 96 actually, Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence. He kind of puts this all together. Reported that the role of emotions in human thought and behavior also added value to leadership. He brought this to the business world and defined emotional intelligence as the ability to perceive, use, understand, and manage emotions. So that is the whole arc and the whole history of how we got to where we are today. It wasn't just one person. It's been multiple layers since the 1920s that have added to this research. And I want to really stress that because I think a lot of us don't know this. And it's important to know that there were multiple factors that brought this home. But what I like about what Goleman talks about is he believed that EI was more important than IQ. It actually over-indexed, and as we all know, what is over-indexed in the work world, at least in general, it's the IQ, right? And in the 50s and 60s, that's all people were hired for. There wasn't anything else to really look at. But based on Goleman's work, this is how EI came to be and got popularized. Best-selling books. He's gone on to write, I think it's at least 25 other books at this point. He has his own coaching certification, which I've also taken and am certified in, because this is how critical this work is to success in business. He has a whole book called Social Intelligence, by the way, as well. And the key with emotional intelligence, it's also known for two distinct approaches in this model. And I'll go, I love this because this is like literally the history of emotional intelligence. But Goleman based a lot of his work on some papers in economics from Salovey and Mayers, where they talked about the concepts of emotional intelligence had four sets of abilities. So one was managing emotions to obtain specific goals. Two was understanding emotions. Three was using emotions to facilitate thinking. And the fourth one was perceiving and interpreting emotions accurately in oneself and others. So that, as we can now see, okay, yeah, those were big attributes. Salovey and Mayers put those together, and let's bring them in this next iteration, which was what Goleman did. And he brought it to the business world, like I said. So that's how it came to be. And this second approach to EQ is termed and mixed in this model where it's not just this emotional skills, but now competence. How competent can we be in personality characteristics like empathy, self-esteem, optimism, stress, the stress tolerance tests that we have, and maybe interpersonal skills like assertiveness. So whatever the model was, these models generated that interest that aligned with learning more, that it wasn't just about your own IQ. And there was more than that for leadership. And there was a beyondness for it to be knowing that EI was more important than IQ. EQ was more important than IQ. And so knowing that, transformational leaders recognize and understand that EI is this critical skill that we all need and know that is essential for business. It's fundamental, and all of us highly skilled leaders know that. And knowing that as the leaders in this field state, Riggio and Richard will say, Ricard, these leaders recognize that feedback is important in honing emotional skills in particular, because nonverbal cues of emotion, unlike verbal statements, are subtle and occur outside of the normal spheres of awareness. So think about that for a second. And you might have heard the statistic. The percentage of what we remember of someone when we meet them, so there's verbal and nonverbal. Verbal is about 7%. Like what you hear them say resonates and you remember 7% of that versus their nonverbal cues, their appearance, how they present themselves, the relationship when you first meet them and see them. So what are we saying about all this? With social intelligence, I'd say emotions unite us. They are the common language that unite our minds, our bodies, and our hearts. and help us achieve wholeness. And that's actually a quote that I will cite from my mentors, Bob and Judith Wright. They wrote about that in The Heart of Transformation, which is incredible. We need to have our mind, our heart, and our bodies in everything that we do in social intelligence, because those nonverbal cues are basically everything that's not going on outside our mouth. So when we're leaders and we rise up in those ranks, it's important to know that this is as critical a skill as the knowledge skills that you have. And it's also important to know that expression of positive emotions is important. So what I mean by that is knowing that you can focus on feelings of positivity, motivation, performance, vision, versus things like disappointment, like feeling defeated, and letting that be the focus areas. On an interpersonal level, I think leaders need to manage these emotions like anger and frustration so that they can move into a space that feels more in a place that is conducive for bringing others with you as followers. So that's a lot of what I wanted to share today. It's a big history of emotional intelligence, but you can see now how it's evolved and why it's not just about your own awareness. It's about the social awareness for you to show up with others in a successful and comprehensive, productive way. Not comprehensive, but productive way. And we don't really think about it like that a lot. And that's why I think things are taking off, like team coaching, team dynamics, learning about how we interoperate with each other, because that's key to our success. And if we aren't developing things at a fundamental level, like trust with each other and reading the room, those are skills, then we're not going to be as successful as we could. And remember, it starts with you. If you don't have that own awareness of yourself, of how you're feeling, how you're regulating, how could you possibly be expected to relate and be with others in that way, in social awareness? All right, I'll leave it there. If you want help with this, here I am. I would love to support you. So let me know, drop me a line, and help me understand what I could serve you with. I would love to support you in being the social awareness transformative leader that you are. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on the Pausecast.